everybody. Raul here for Jazz Guitar Today, and today we have the great honor and pleasure of chatting with President and CEO of Asterope Premium Audio Cables, Dariush Rad.
Raul, how are you? It's good to join you.
I'm really excited to have a chance to talk to Dariush. I know there's some instrument cable stuff we want to talk about, but before we do, let's take a step back. Tell us a little bit about your past and your background. How did you get to start on this, and how did you get to where you are today?
I appreciate the opportunity to share that. So I grew up out in West Texas and was musical growing up. I ended up attending school at the University of North Texas, which is rather acclaimed for their jazz music program. And when I arrived there, found that the level of musicianship was way exceeding to my skill set, and that hacking Blackbird on the acoustic guitar was not going to keep me up with the monster fusion horn players and all that were there in Denton as well. So I ended up studying sociology, but all my roommates and best friends were all world-renowned guys who were working their way into the 1 O'Clock Jazz Band. And I ended up, when I graduated, recording an album with some hot young players who have all gone on to have amazing careers that we've all heard over the years. And then I moved to Nashville and was recording music out there. I then parlayed into some video and film work, and then I found myself with one of the first web design companies in the mid-90s in Nashville. When I moved back to Texas in 2000 with music background and all this multimedia and marketing background, I got a call from someone who had been exposed to some developers with a unique technology, and I thought with my music interest and my marketing interest, this might be a great opportunity. So about 15 years ago, I got involved and started helping with the development of the technology and the product line. And about 10 years ago, started Asterope as an operating company to carry the technology into the market. So that is the long and short of it. The music and marketing kind of collapsed into the opportunity, and it's been quite a ride.
Asterope Audio Cable, you've got a product line. Tell us a little bit about all the things that you guys have to offer.
You bet. Well, we launched with a Core MI line, which was just our first instrument cable, and we expanded into Pro Audio. So we've got microphone cables, speaker solutions that would include head to cab. For your audience, more specifically, we've got either quarter-inch and or speak-on speaker solutions that are just tremendous. And so we recently launched a full spectrum bass line. So we've got various instrument cables and speaker solutions for you guys. And I think that's it right now. We started with one SKU and we're up to over 200 that
Nice.
Include quite a robust line to help address anything on a stage and or studio, anywhere signal needs to be enhanced.
There's multiple parts. There's the cable, the aspect of the cable itself, because I could see it going between A to B, whether it's instrument to amplifier or amplifier to speaker or from microphone to wherever. So a big part of what you guys do has to do with that cable portion. What makes your Asterope cable so special and different than other cables?
Oh, I appreciate that question as well. As an artist, I had played through cables my whole life, and until I had received a sample of this one, I personally didn't realize how critical the signal path was. And as we dug deeper into enhancing the solution, what I realized was there is no one single aspect of the wire that makes it better. And so what we've tried to do is reduce resistance and increase inductance at every aspect of the wire, from the inside out and from end to end. So whether it's the materials themselves, ours are enhanced. If it's the geometry, the geometric configurations of the wires, ours are enhanced. Our manufacturing facilities, I mean, everything we're doing is better. If you'll notice on our cables, we use non-metallic barrels. Those non-metallic barrels reduce eddy current and looping, which can have a negative impact on highs. Most other manufacturers are using metal barrels. Mm-hmm. The connectors we're using are a patented solid core connector where the tip of that enters your instrument runs through an insulation plate that we actually solder to that rod, rather than letting all the beauty of your rig and your instrument and everything come down and then get compromised by a little piece of plastic and some tin that typically is where the signal moves from the wire into the connector. And so, again, it's a holistic approach in materials and design and in some unique processes that the wire undergoes after it's been manufactured to, again, enhance inductance, decrease resistance, and what ends up happening is the electrons flow more smoothly, they are less impeded, and basically it's preserving the integrity of the data pack in the electron so that when it arrives where it's going, what we end up hearing in the room is essentially a much more phase coherent population of the waves as they couple into the room, and those frequencies then ascend and tickle our ears in a more effective way. And so we're able at a human level to really respond to those frequencies. A wonderful study in hypersonics and psychoacoustics by Bell Labs for 50 years. It's been understood forever that our ears mechanically hear up to about 20K, right? And so everybody knows that. But what most people don't know is, as a result of these studies, is that the human mind can perceive harmonics over 400K. And when the frequencies in the room are in phase and are coupling and rapidly ascending, those clean frequencies can hit our ear faster, and we have what is a more natural reaction to those frequencies at a human level. And so honoring this new understanding of the human capacity to respond to higher harmonics is a core part of our mission in helping hopefully raise sonic standards for ourselves and the entire industry.
The one thing I noticed right offhand, the moment I got your cable in my hands, this thing is hefty. It's nice and thick. It feels just sturdy. It's like ironclad. It's a real brute of a cable. Even the thicker gauge is essential for electron flow, if I'm not mistaken. Is it giving more surface or? Well,
the jacketing, what you're feeling in that heavier jacketing is helping protect the structural integrity of the geometry. Okay. And we all over in our careers have had a cable go microphonic on us. And what's happening when that happens is usually the conductors have been displaced. Maybe they got stepped on or a flight case or something. And once those conductors are displaced, the cable stops, and the shielding stops acting as a shield and becomes an antenna. Okay. And so that extra jacketing on there helps protect the structural integrity of those conductors and reduce the potential of it becoming microphonic. And ultimately, that's the reason. Plus, it feels good.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that also, an interesting characteristic with your cables, they're unidirectional. So there is the right way to be plugging them in. How does that happen? In my brain, I see like a little door that opens and lets things go, but if they try to come back the other way, it won't work.
No, it's not like that. It's really interesting. You can play the cable either way, but from a physics standpoint, when you take a conductive material, in our case copper, really clean copper, and you pull it through a die, the direction that you're pulling that wire through the die is the direction that the electrons tend to want to flow. So you've got to move deep into the crystalline structure at an atomic level and understanding how the lattice in that crystal lines up, and the electrons tend to be accelerated in those ways. And so we're trying to be thoughtful every step of the way of making sure that happens. You can play the cable backwards, and what you might hear would be a super subtle tonal difference. Another part of that, Raul, is that we tie the shield on the outbound end or the load end, right? Gotcha. And we've got a really heavy-duty cross-braided shield that we're using to keep it more quiet, but you want to dump any noise that shield has maybe gathered. You want to dump that out the outbound end, hence again the directionality. So there's 2 or 3 things that are happening there that are of high science, and one of my fondest NAN memories was having Eric Johnson give me a big bear hug and say, "Thank you for acknowledging directionality in cables." So finally somebody agrees.
There we go.
So it's real. I'll tell you another thing on that subject real quick. Is I have some recording engineers will call me, one in particular I can remember, called me from Nashville and said, "Dariush, we were in session, we were using Asterope, and this we had this old Fender, and it had that inherent Fender buzz. And he said, and I flipped the cable around, and the buzz just went silent. And so, again, talking about gear and some internal nuances in equipment, I think in that case, because of the grounding of the shield, it took the noise out.
Better living through technology. I'm all for that. And as somebody that has been exposed to instrument cables since the 60s, I've been commenting that my first cable probably had all of the elements of things that were wrong. It had the metal covers. It was a curly Q cable. It was a mess. And little did I know, maybe at the time it did make a difference what my sound was like because I was in 5th grade, but things can get better and do get better. Now, on that note, let me also, in the details, there's a difference between the bass cable and the regular instrument cable. How are they different?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Raul. So essentially our primary instrument cables, a lighter wire, it's a 20 gauge wire, and that's a standard for most MI and pro audio cables, i.e. guitar cables, XLRs, whatever.
Sure.
The bass cable is a 16 gauge cable. It's a little bit heavier. And so what happens when you have a 16 gauge cable, it's going to deliver more of the bottom end of the frequencies. And so what we found was we were able to sort of damp the tone by going with a heavier wire, and it really accentuated the bottom end of the core frequencies that a bass needs to be heard. So we have a lot of bass players kind of depending on whether they're using an active bass or passive pickup. Mm-hmm. They'll like the lighter stuff because they want to get those sweet highs that they'll get out of the 20 gauge wire. And we've got some other guys, they just want to get that breathy bottom end of the thing, and that bass cables really delivers more of the bottom end. I remember the first time we discovered that, I had Chris Marish over, who's Eric's player, mm-hmm. and we plugged that thing in and just looked at each other. I remember us thinking, I think one of us, I said, Luke, I am your father. There was so much bottom end and depth. The color just got really heavy, and we high-fived each other, and I think I called my brother Dean and said, we've got a new cable. So, nice. So it's the weight. It's the weight that makes that difference. On the bass cable, we're using a nickel connector, mm-hmm. and I don't think we've made any with the gold connector, which was our studio line. But so that's the standard nickel connector.
And that might be the difference, because I think I have the studio line on the instrument, which is gold.
That's what it was. You're exactly right. I sent you a studio which had the gold plated connector. Okay. And that was a 20 gauge. Mm-hmm. And then you received the bass cable, which again was the 16 with the nickel connector. So gotcha. You got a couple of different things probably playing with the tone a little bit. When I describe the tonal difference, and I've got a lot of bass players who have one of each, and they all know exactly why to go to which cable for what they're playing or where they're at. I describe it more as a color difference. If you walked up to a painting in your hallway at a certain time of day, the reds have a certain tone. Mm-hmm. And you come back to that painting 4 hours later and the sun's moved around behind you and those reds have a different tone. It's not like the colors are changing, but the medium, I think, shapes the color a little bit. But regardless of which cable it is, sonically, there's more always. There's more data, there's more spectral balance, there's better bandwidth response, there's more clarity, and that's just consistent over and over again, regardless of the environment.
And on the brief topic of speak-on cables, because that was an evolution even for myself. My prior amp and cab just used a instrument type 1/4 inch connection, and then when I upgraded to my current DNA amplification system, I needed speak-ons. And I noticed the Asterope speak-on, again, very sturdy feeling, very solid. The others, I had a brand X, and it's kind of floppy around. Does it have the same kind of, as the instrument cable? I suppose, what are the differences?
Well, the speak-on, that was just us responding to the market. And okay. As those amp manufacturers started going with that harness, we just needed to meet them there. I think probably for you guys, and if I think on the handful of conversations I've had with some amp manufacturers who were making that transition themselves, it's just a more solid connection for you guys, and the housing manages a heavier wire. Our speak-on speaker wire again, we talked about going from 20 gauge down to 16 for the base cable. That Speakon is a 14 gauge wire, you see, and so it's even handling more current. The heavier the wire as well, it's going to manage voltage and current a little bit more fluidly, and again with less resistance. It just is going to get more and more of that nice warm bottom end, that color that I think bass players long for.
So many musicians are constantly in a search for their sound, and it hinges on the details of what strings they have, what instrument they have found. So many that I talk to, if you ask them, how do you get your sound? They show you their hands and they go, it's all in my hands. But the reality of the matter is, it has to get to the audience's ears somehow. It's got to translate from what they're doing on their hands to get to the audience ears. So the more faithful communication of that signal, the better the perception of the nuances. Now, granted, there are some genres of music that are feeding into a pedal board, that are trying to distort, that are trying to alter the sound. In those cases, it's so different than what it sounded like when it left the instrument, when it left their hands. But still, you want to have a faithful communication even between that pedal board to your amplifier, so you can get those nuances out to people. So that's going to be instrumental. And with the high end, our jazz guitar people, there's a lot of subtleties with their sounds, and they're trying so hard. So it's important to get those communicated across.
Absolutely. That's absolutely right. I mean, our cable should be getting out of the way of whatever that pickup is delivering. And that's the place where a signal is most likely to be corrupted. And that's where we really shine. It's really preserve the integrity of those nuances and subtle characteristics of the instrument that so often are distorted before they ever get into the first phase of application or down into the pedal, into the pedal board. Bass players aren't using as many pedals, and probably jazz players not as much either. Most of the jazzers I know are a bit more purist. But regardless, with this technology, you'll hear your instrument like you've never heard it before in your life. That's for sure, because what's going to be delivered is going to be more pure and more clean and more clear and a more articulate reflection of the characteristics that I think the luthier's heart is when they're creating these instruments. And it's just so amazing to see so much thought and energy going into all of those other components. And then when people come down, I mean, it's all about signal, right? But when it comes down to maintaining the integrity of that signal from one component to the next, we disregard it. And I think the reason the market's disregarded it is that there has not been any major advent in cable and wire technology for decades. This is different technology. And we go as far as say, this is cable technology 2.0. We'll put our cables up against any cable on the market. I have a 100-foot Asterope that I go and demonstrate with, and I encourage people to bring their favorite 10-foot. That's a demonstration of a different technology.
Wow.
Right? And we make some very long cables for some artists that we all know, and those are guys that don't want to be wireless, and they appreciate having the integrity of their signal on large stages. And so there's real science here, and we're proud to be helping share it with all of our brothers and sisters out there that are inspired to help the world keep smiling through music.
And looking ahead, what projects do you guys have in the future? What is Asterope going to be doing? What can we look for from you guys?
Well, in the audio industry, we're going to keep exploring what's happening within both MI and Pro Audio. We have our site, we have a consumer product that we're super excited about, which is an aux cable that is just mind-blowing to think you can hop out of your iPhone or a handheld device and amplify those cloudy MP3s, just open up and blossom. And perhaps after that, high-end home audio, as I mentioned, is another realm, but more exciting for us as a company are just basically other applications of this technology in other industries, whether that be aerospace or healthcare. We have opportunities that have been presented that we've been exploring and are now getting the clinical data that we need to, without question, demonstrate that the performance characteristics of the products we're making are superior to other such products on the market. And so that's exciting for us, but being an artist my whole life. All my best friends are players and producers and engineers. Asterope's just super excited after 10 years in the industry. We're celebrating our 10-year anniversary this year,
Nice.
and we're just super proud to be a part of such a dynamic industry that has such an impact, I want to say again, on the heartbeat of the world. I mean, what we do as artists is important stuff. And how those moments that have inspired us are communicated to the people that get to hear our music is important stuff. Mm-hmm. And they deserve to hear those spiritual expressions with clarity and with confidence. And I hope that any of your viewers out there, regardless of the instrument of choice, that they would give us the opportunity to manage and honor their signal with our products. So we appreciate this opportunity to visit with you.
Very cool. And if somebody wants to know more, the best place to look would be asterope.com?
Yes, sir, it would. It sure would. Yeah, that's the best place to go. We've got a wonderful YouTube channel with some great testimonials with a lot of peers, and that would be at youtube.com/Asterope TV.
Okay.
They can see hear some testimonials there as well.
Well, Dariush, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with us. Folks, especially those jazz guitar players out there, give these cables a listen. Hear it for yourself. This has been Raul for Jazz Guitar Today, bringing you Dariush Rad with Asterope.